If you were somehow able to go back in time to, let's say, the 1950s, you would see that driving was a totally different experience. Gas was cheap, and it came with your own pit crew for no extra charge. Maybe that's too far back. Let's try the 1960s. Gas was still really cheap, but even more important than the gasoline for your car was the music that your car produced. For the longest time, your personal music options were pretty limited. Of course, there was a standard equipment radio, which was initially only AM, and for a while you could also get a record player for the car. Yes, an actual record player. It played 45s and had an extra heavy tone arm to minimize skipping. But the record still skipped, and the mechanism wore down those records pretty badly, as well as the player. Besides that, the unit was so expensive, few could afford it. And for those who could, after your favorite records were ruined, you really felt like punching someone. But by the mid-60s, there was finally something for the music lover on the go, the Stereo 8 player, later known as the 8-track. This was designed by a team of engineers that included the guy who made Learjets, Bill Lear. Now, he wanted something that could play his music aboard his aircraft that wouldn't be affected by sudden air turbulence, or people scrambling around to find those air sickness bags. And yes, even in those multi-million-dollar jet planes, he still wanted something relatively inexpensive. Now, there are 4 tracks available previously, but they were rather costly, so the 8-track was more fitting and would become a cultural icon. As we headed into the 70s, gas was still affordable, at least in the early part of the decade, even though they had just introduced this thing called self-service.
Hey, buddy, can I get a little gas over here? Get it your damn self.
And everyone was out and about with their 8-track players and tapes.
Radio Shack has a super half-price deal now on an 8-track car stereo tape player. Regularly $59.95, now just $29.95. You save $30 and get your choice of music wherever you drive. Put stereo 8-track players in 2 cars for the regular price of 1. Or buy 1 and have enough money left over for car speakers and your first tape. Get on the road to savings now with this sale-priced realistic 8-track car stereo tape player. Only at Radio Shack.
And the great thing was, you didn't need a car for your music to be portable and stylish. Now, they are called 8-track tapes because each of the 4 programs is comprised of 2 tracks playing simultaneously to provide stereo sound. The big advantage to 8 tracks, especially in the car, was that they played in an endless loop. This allowed the listener to enjoy a continuous flow of music without having to flip over to side 2, which of course was a characteristic of vinyl records and cassettes. Ford was the first automotive company to introduce the players in its cars. They did so initially in the Mustang, Thunderbird, and Lincoln models in the mid-60s.
There's quite a herd of Mustangs around these days. Nearly 700,000 have been purchased since the introduction 17 months ago. The interiors have changed, however, and new standard equipment features include a 5-dial instrument cluster, front and rear seat belts, outside mirror, and a flasher warning system. The list of luxury and sports options is even longer this year and includes the Stereosonic tape system. The 1966 Mustangs can be seen in Ford dealer showrooms now.
Even the karaoke machine, invented in 1971 by Daisuke Inouye, used this technology, and it was called the 8-Juke, a wooden box that combined microphone, amplifier, coin box, and an 8-track tape player. The U.S. was in love with the 8-track, which hit its peak in popularity in 1978. But by then, cracks were beginning to show between the tracks, and behind the music, 8-tracks were beginning to hit some sour notes. It was the beginning of the end. As you may recall, 8-track players were notoriously hungry beasts that often fed off the very tapes we needed for our own musical survival. This was not only irritating, but if your favorite tape was eaten while on the road, for the rest of your trip you had to endure silence, except for the mumbled cursing coming from underneath your breath. Another less than admirable feature was that 8-tracks had no rewind. If your favorite song had just finished and you wanted to hear it again, the best you could do was click forward to the track just before that one, and since tracks would be at the same time frame, you had to wait for whatever that song was playing to finish before it would advance to your tune. Now, this did build patience, as well as a colorful vocabulary. Owning 8-tracks were also a disadvantage to non-smokers. This is because eventually you would need a book of matches to wedge in the slot between the tape and the player so that it fits snugly enough to play properly. Remember those times? Oh, what fun. But the number one most annoying feature of 8-tracks were that quite often your favorite song, the song for which you bought the entire tape, would have been placed at a dividing point between tracks. And it didn't just click onto the next track to continue. It faded out on the one track, then clicked, and faded up onto the next. That too greatly expanded our repertoire of words you don't repeat around grandma. By the late 70s, 8-tracks were on the decline in favor of cassette players. Cassettes were smaller and cheaper. But what could you do if you had an expensive car with a factory-installed music system that was now obsolete? Well, the obvious choice would be to get rid of that car. Fortunately, there was another option. Unfortunately, it was less than satisfying. 8-track to cassette converters sold pretty well, and you can still find them online to this day. However, if you preferred your music to sound good, you are better off just replacing the whole deck with a cassette player, which we all knew would be more durable. Fortunately, we all had a highly sophisticated precision tool to fix most cassette calamities. By 1982, 8-tracks were no longer being sold in stores. You could still find them in thrift stores and at garage sales because there was at least one audiophile who stubbornly refused to give them up.
I'll put one in and the rest is history.
That's how it happened 25 years ago for Bob Hemans.
This is just one little...
Here amongst Bob's 8-track tape collection in Flora, Illinois, there are tapes on the shelves, tapes on the floor, tapes in the rafters.
I'm just trying to find a bigger building.
He'll soon need it. Bob's packed 2 buildings already with every 8-track artist, every 8-track hit of the 60s and 70s, and some tapes you've never heard of.
How about a motorhome owner's guide?
A walk through Bob's collection, if you could actually walk through here, will astound you. Over 500 8-track players, 280 karaoke tapes. And how many 8-track tapes?
This is Elvis right here.
Listen to this, 61,837. Oddly enough, back when 8-tracks were in, Bob hated them. He told his brothers straight up he wanted nothing to do with 8-tracks.
I told him, I said, you guys are crazy. Why? And I said, 8-track tapes take up so much room in the front seat. I want my girlfriend sitting next to me, not a bunch of tape.
Bob Hemans' collection of 8-tracks may be the largest in the world, but that's not why he's so proud of it. Fact is, Bob likes 8-tracks better than anything that's come along since, iPods included.
I don't think they have any class. 8-track tapes have some class.
From the man whose collection is in a class all its own.
When other methods proved insufficient, there was one other source if you really had to stock up on the format. Columbia House continued to offer 8-track tapes through their record club until 1988. And hopefully you read the fine print before shelling out your dough. That's because those offers, just like a forest-dwelling dole, was not always under $1. What are some of your 8-track memories, good or bad? Let me know in the comments section. And make sure you check out some of my other videos. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. That way you'll be notified whenever I add a new video to the channel. Thanks again for watching.